All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you guys for coming out. I know this probably feels a little bit like going back in time, back to high school, but this setup was here for some people who are coming in really early tomorrow, so we're leaving it out this way so that they're ready for their thing. So hopefully you don't mind the extra desk space. So my name is Taylor Goodwin, or Dr. Taylor Goodwin, if you prefer. I am a naturopathic doctor. So naturopathic doctors, I often get asked what the heck is a neuropath or a naturopath, however you say that word, path. Naturopathic doctor is a doctor who went through medical school, good start, and then specialized in alternative medicine. So that means things like lifestyle, diet, nutrition, root causes, and then also some other tools like acupuncture, hydrotherapy, and then my personal favorite, herbs. And that's why we're here tonight. So I've been a little bit of an herb nerd since I was about yay tall. My mom gave me this little book. It was like by something really sciencey, like Reader's Digest or something like that, and it had a bunch of herbs in there. And I started reading through that. I started with Achillean mellifolium, which is yarrow, and about how Achilles had used that to staunch blood flow from his fellow soldiers to save them from dying, and I was hooked. So I started looking for wild plants around me, and my mom started having to call and say, "Taylor, get out of the neighbor's lawn." So, I've matured since then. Now my wife calls me out of neighbor's lawns. So, progress. But fast forward a little bit, I went through medical school, and I just found that a lot of things that we deal with in this country, chronic health issues or common health issues, they are much better dealt with the old proverb, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And a pound of cure usually feels a little like that kind of pounding sometimes. So it's nice if you can get the root causes taken care of. And a lot of those come back to the way that we eat. And the way we eat often can use a little bit more in the realm of plants and herbs. I was really excited after I finished medical school, because I finished medical school. That was exciting. But also because I came out here. And climate change from Arizona to here, that was one really exciting point. But like half of all of the plants that I've been studying since I was a kid, I've always been in the West. Well, in the West or out of country. New Zealand is also gorgeous, I can tell you that. I was there right when Lord of the Rings came out, and it was fantastic. But coming out here, like half of all the plants that I've been studying my whole life, they just grow wild. You don't have to be coaxing them in the garden. Matter of fact, if you try and plant anything here, I found out Oklahoma or Arkansas, just the Ozarks in general, are going to say, we already have an idea of what's going to grow there. And it'll go ahead and take over the plot with something else. And then you're like, I tried to plant that over there and the same thing happened. No, we wanted it here. All right, there it is. But yeah, so there's a lot of really cool plants here with a lot of really cool uses. Today, we're going to go ahead and talk about some of those. 3 in particular. I like to go through these kinds of seminars, which are monthly, by the way, with new plants every month. I like to go through these in kind of a 3-stage process, which anyone who's been here knows is more of a 2.5-stage process, because I always clip the last bit, but we'll get there. Number 1, I talk about safety, because anytime we're talking about a situation where a small mistake can sometimes lead to big consequences, that's when safety needs to be talked about. Wild plants, that's one of them. There are some stories. There was a park ranger, he didn't have enough lettuce on his sandwich, and he just reached out and grabbed a random leaf, and unfortunately that was his last sandwich. So we do need to be careful, but once you know what to do, it's not that hard to stay safe. So we just need to have a bit of that. So we'll start with a bit of safety. Number 2, we'll go into the plants that grow here in the Ozarks. We've got some wild ones here, they're lovely. And then number 3, I'll talk about some events. We'll talk, and I'll take questions, but really just raise your hand throughout, because I talk a lot. So if you want your question answered, it's best to just go ahead and throw it up in the middle. So safety, plants, events, and questions, those are the 3 things. So we're going to go ahead and crack into section 1. Section 1, safety. So for this, I've got a few different stories I'd like to tell. Let's go ahead. I was in Colorado. And I was going through my undergrad, and I started out in automotive industrial management, clearly where you pictured me. I'm ready then you work on cyborgs now. That's what I say. So, but I was kind of done with the cars for that day, and my friend came over and said, "Hey, I've got a plant walk because you started talking nerdy about plants." And I kept sneaking biology classes, so I had all these biology friends, and I didn't know anyone in the automotive industrial management classes, which should have been a sign. And so I went off on this plant walk, and it's the only time, one of the only 2 times I ever played hooky in school was to go and do this plant walk. And so we went there, and we met at a library, portentous, and there were some cool displays, and but then after talking a little bit, we went off into the Rocky Mountains. And we went along some hillsides, some mountainsides a little bit. We saw sedum, stone crop, this little spiky moss-like plant, except it's a little bit more substantial than moss is. It's just very small. And it grows in the crevices of boulders, and it's edible. And it has some medicinal uses as well. I think it might be analgesic. I don't, meaning pain relieving. Don't quote me on the use on that one, because I haven't seen it out here, so it's a little bit further back in my memory. But then we kept going, and we saw this gorgeous flower, which is called osha, or bear plant. And we got down there, and we dug into the roots a little bit, and we scratched it, and we smelled it. To me, it smelled like butterscotch. Beautiful. I love butterscotch. Everyone else smelled something else pleasant. My nose is a little screwed up. But it was pleasant, whatever it was. So, little caveat, if I ever tell you how something smells, you can always wonder, is that for you or for everyone else? You know, whatever. But we kept going, and then the reason I tell this story is we came to another plant, we came to kind of a plateau. The vista opened up, we're no longer going along the side where it's a drop off there and steep over here. We come off the trail and it opens up, and we see this pasture plant, clover, but tall, sweet clover. Yellow flowers, tall, elongated flower spike compared to the lower clover. It stretched out a bit. And the guy, Cattail Bob Seebeck, as he's called, started telling us about how it's really good for minerals and really good tea. And then one of our posse, our group, piped up and said, "What about the ergot fungus thing? That's kind of an important safety thing." And Cattail Bob Seebeck, maybe he was about to talk about it, maybe not. And he said, "Well, sounds like you know about it. Why don't you tell us?" This person started to go ahead and tell us about the story of ergot fungus, which I'll abbreviate for you here. Sweet clover was something that would be grazed on by cattle quite often, but a change came around in the 1800s where we started baling sweet clover. And after that happened, all of a sudden, they started finding cattle that were in the pastures dead, and they bled out from the inside, and they didn't know why. And, you know, some people were like, "Le chupacabra," you know, the demon spirit from Mexico has come to eat your cattle, you know. And it's maybe some of them, but for most of them, there's an entire novel this thick of the detective work that went in to try and figure this out. And eventually they found out that if you bind up sweet clover, it stays wet. And when it stays wet, it gets mold or fungus. And there's a special fungus called ergot that really likes to grow on it. Like, basically, if there's something on there, it's probably ergot. And ergot fungus is where we get the drug warfarin. And so if anyone's familiar with warfarin, it is one of the primary, very strong blood thinners that we use in hospitals still today. And so we took this thing that was killing cattle, and we've used it in small doses so that we can save lives with it. But if you have too much of it, the same thing would happen as we saw with those cattle. So I tell this story for a few different reasons. Number one, there are safety things that you need to know about. And so just be aware that we want to have good research before we go out and eat anything just willy-nilly. Try to have more than one source. Hello, my name is Dr. Goodwin, also known as Dr. One Source, okay? Try to have at least 2. Cattail Bob Seebeck, he might have been about to mention that ergot fungus. He might have been about to completely forget. And I've had other experiences where either others or myself have forgotten something, and I'm driving home, and oh shoot, I hope I didn't just kill someone. You know, it's like, usually it's not that severe, especially since I try really hard to be on it, but it's like, we forget stuff, especially when we're in presenter mode. So try to have two sources, okay? Before you go and put anything in your mouth. Books forget stuff too, or they just get it wrong occasionally. So that's reason number one, have more than one source. Reason number two, warfarin is a medication. Kind of came from not exactly a plant, but a fungus that grows on a plant. Plants and medications can interact. 70 to 90% of medications are derived from plants, so it makes sense they've got some interaction going. Some plants are much safer. I'm going to try and give you numbers to differentiate those so that you know about safety. But basically, if you have medications, usually best to talk to your doctor to make sure before you're using any medicinal levels of plants. Fun little aside here. In Cherokee heritage, in Cherokee lore and tradition, they would take all of their herbs that they use for medicine, the medicine women and the medicine men, in the Paint clan of the Cherokee tribe. They would learn for 17 years, and they would divide plants by two different systems that they would use both of. One of them was for what it does, and we'll put that to the side. That was based off of compass directions, is how they organized those. But over here we have safety. And they divided those into three different categories. And I want you to think about plants this way. Category one, food. Pretty safe. It's something you throw in the pot. Often English heritage people would call those pot herbs because you just chuck it in the pot. That one's usually pretty safe. If we call it a pot herb, there's usually not going to be a problem unless you're having a mound full and it's like, it's coming back up. If you have that much of anything, then that's too much. People have gone overboard on water, so you can pretty much have that happen. But number two is medicinal plants. Now, number one has medicinal uses. Number two, though, you don't really just eat them as food. They're as needed, not something that you're going to make a meal out of. Number three, poison. Poison plants. Now, poisonous means it can be dangerous or can kill you. But actually in small doses, and I'm not going to encourage you to go out and experiment with this, but in small doses, those are actually medicinal a lot of the time. I'd say 90 to 95% of the time. The plants that the Cherokee categorized as poisonous were medicinal in proper doses. Warfarin, definitely in the poisonous category according to the Cherokee divisions, because it could kill you if you use it wrong. But it also can save a lot of lives. Going to plants, we see the same thing. So I'm going to try and tell you 1, 2, and 3. If I don't, then you'll know that I'm still me. Feel free to remind me. But any questions on our safety discussion here? Okay. Last thing, there are handouts at the end of that table. There's 2 of them. One of them tells you about the last safety tip. And that is not safety for us, but safety for our plant friends. We actually can over-harvest plants till they're gone. There are some plants that are almost locally extinct. Golden seal is endangered in the area. I don't harvest it. I don't really teach about it either. There's also American ginseng, amazing plant, endangered. So try to only harvest plants that are common, and then only harvest up half of them. If they're uncommon, try to take only leaves, because that's not going to harm them too much. And if they're rare or endangered, take nothing but photographs, leave nothing but footprints. That way they can make a comeback. Osha, the butterscotch smelling root, that one was endangered. That's why we didn't harvest it. It has come back some since then because people were willing to keep their hands on it. So that's the last safety tip, not for us, but for them. And now, let's dive into our plants for this month. All right, let's go ahead. Start with this one. This one's super common, but super useful. Anyone want to take a guess? If you can even read my handwriting, you might get a cheat answer. It's probably right on the page if I didn't remember to cover it up, which I probably did. What is this guy?
I have it in my garden.
That's a good start. All right, this is plantago or plantain.
Oh, yeah.
Not the banana. So banana grows somewhere else. It's a same name, different plant. But this is plantago. There are 2 species. There's lanceolata with the lance-shaped leaves right here. And then there's major. This one shriveled up before I started to press it. I put it to the side, come back 2 hours later, and it's half the size. But major usually has big leaves. So, plantain has some fascinating stories. So, it's not actually native to this continent. The European settlers, when they came over, Plantago is one that they would use as a pot herb. It's a number 1 on our safety index. 1, 2, 3. It's a number 1. This is a food grade one. One I would not be really concerned if someone went ahead and popped it. But the European settlers, it's a useful plant. So they brought some over, probably intentionally, but the seed heads on this plant make 20,000 seeds a plant. And they have a little bit of static electricity cling. So whether they decided to bring it or not, they did. Plantago sounds a lot like the word plantar. And plantar, if you guys have heard of maybe plantar fasciitis, plantar warts. Plantar fasciitis is when you have the bottom of your foot really hurts and it sucks. So I'm really sorry for those of you who knows what it is, because that's no fun. Plantar warts means warts on the bottom of the foot build up, and then they make your walking really painful, and it goes all the way up your leg and then up your spine. You're like, why does the bump on my toe make my neck hurt? It's not fun. But plantar means bottom of the foot. When the colonial Europeans were exploring, the Native Americans watched, and they saw that everywhere the white man went, his faithful plant followed behind him as the 20,000 seeds just released off of their clothing. And so they named that plant White Man's Footprint. And so Plantago is bottom of the foot. It's named after that Native American name, White Man's Footprint. Plantago, bottom of the foot. So, lanceolata, so Plantago, there's Plantago major and Plantago lanceolata. Major just means big. So it's got the big leaf, is one species. The other species is lanceolata, it's got the big, long, pointy leaves. You can see the 2 different ones here, big, long, pointy, or big and fat. So this plant actually is fantastic for a number of different uses. Quick story, there was a couple families in Idaho, and they were going camping, and they went several days out in the middle of nowhere, because in Idaho you can do that. No one anywhere around. And they were settling in, their kids were having fun, the dogs were playing with each other, and then they heard a yelp. And they ran out there and they saw, going off into the brush, the tail of a rattlesnake. One of the dogs had been bit on the forepaw by a rattlesnake. Now, rattlesnakes are venomous snakes. Not good. So they're 3 days out. They don't have any cell reception. They don't have anti-venom because that's not something that you just carry with you typically. One of the people on that trip was Dr. Patrick Jones. And he's a veterinarian, but the skills he used weren't veterinarian skills, except for a little bit here and there. What he used also an herbalist. And so he went and had people gather a few different things that were there, and one of them was plantain. And he went ahead and he mashed it all up, and he somehow got the dog to eat it. That's the veterinary skill right there. I couldn't do that part. And then they also put it over the top of where it had been bit. Plantago is an anti-venom. In rattlesnake venom, there are little chewer uppers called enzymes, and they break apart collagen and hyaluronic acid and elastin. Those are all things that are in our skin. You've heard of collagen, right? There are things in our skin that make it stay there. Well, if you chew all the stuff up that's making the skin stay there, the skin comes off. And that's what happens with rattlesnake bites, and that's why they're deadly, is everything just kind of falls apart. All the mortar between the bricks, called our cells, just goes away. Plantain stops those enzymes. It stops hyaluronidase, it stops elastase, and it stops collagenase. And so Plantago deactivated all 3 of those enzymes in the venom. And the next morning, the dog was still alive, which shouldn't have happened otherwise. And the dog was able to keep all of its legs. They didn't even have to amputate when they got back. So, anti-venom for Plantago, really cool. How can you use this in your life? Well, go get bit by a rattlesnake and then try it. No, okay. Please get anti-venom if you get bit by a venomous snake. This is not a universal anti-venom, and they mixed other herbs with it to make it do all of those, although this is the one that pulled most of the weight. But what you can do is there are other creatures with venom that we deal with around here, and they're not life-threatening, but they're obnoxious as heck. Anyone want to take a guess at what these are? Mosquitoes, not that guess, and that's a good way to use this one. Mosquitoes, this is helpful in a different way, but I like it, we'll get there. Wasp, also this one's really helpful. That one does have some venom-like substance. I need to look at the enzymes in that one. Think 8 legs. Spiders. Spiders use similar venom components to some snakes, including collagenase, elastase, and hyaluronic acidase, or hyaluronidase, that chew up the mortar between our cells, which use all of those things to be built up. I had a friend who got bit by a spider right there. Not fun. She went in and got checked because I wasn't her doctor, because usually when you're friends, that's not how that works. And it wasn't a brown recluse and all that sort of thing. She came back, and 3 days later, she said, "Okay, Taylor, I still have a headache. I can't sleep. I've had a pounding headache 24/7 since I've been bit for 3 days. Do you have anything?" And that sounded pretty bad. So I went back into my little medicinary kit, and I pulled out what I had, and I had a little jar of plantain salve, where I extracted it and then put it into a cream that you could put, basically. And we put it on there, and there were a couple other things in the salve too, but this is the one that was pulling the beast's portion. And in 2 hours, I didn't expect this. I expected it to be helpful. In 2 hours, completely gone. No more headache. Still had active enzymes going and causing the headache, almost certainly, for it to have that much of an effect. So, anti-venom is the first medicinal use that we've talked about for Plantago. Another medicinal use for Plantago is vulnerary. Anyone want to take a guess at what that fancy word means? It means you sneeze. No, all right. Vulnerary is just a fancy word for wound healing. This is the one that I think Plantago is often known for. Plantain is often known for being wound healing, for mosquito bites, wasp stings, burns, small cuts. Just basically any kind of bump or bruise that you get on your skin, this guy helps your cells go ahead and revitalize and replicate in a non-cancerous way to go ahead and heal that up. And so it speeds wound healing. And so with the spider bite, there was actually a big red circle as well. This deactivated the enzymes as an antivenom, but it also helped the bite area heal, because it was able to help the cellular repair functions go faster in the cells. So Plantago, very safe, very effective, vulnerary. I like to call this nature's Band-Aid. It's basically used that way. You can delicately take a leaf, clean it, go ahead and bruise it up so that all the goodness inside the leaf starts to come out, mash it up. Add a few drops of oil so it has some moisture for the good stuff to travel through, and then put it over the top and wrap with a muslin cloth. Or, if no one's looking, you can grab a leaf, chew it up, spit it out, and put it on top. So, that's the Boy Scout method. Curing twice as many people as it infects, But actually, no, the Boy Scout method works really well. The only time you don't want to do that method is if it is an open wound. You need to have a layer over the top. You don't want to be jamming plant matter down into an open wound. No matter how wound healing it is, it's also irritating plant substance that you need to, have a layer of cloth over to keep it out. So, for the wound healing side, my wife, she got a nail infection underneath her nail. And you know how those can sometimes get really stubborn. And she had tried AAA for like 3 weeks, and it just wasn't working. And I feel like we tried some other stuff. I was still back in med school, so I was like this all the time. So she was mostly trying to figure out what to do. And then after 3 weeks, I I know you're studying, but can you help me? Yes, please tell me earlier. And came out and some of the same salve actually, put that over the top, and it was able to kick the infection, which is a little interesting because usually Plantago is not something that kills microbes. It helps the body heal instead. But by helping the body have less load, I'm guessing what happened is the body's own immune system was able to make it have more energy directed towards it, and so it was able to go through. Also, the last action for Plantago also might have been an effect, and that's astringent or tightening. If you go to the kitchen and the sponge is down in the sink, what's that sponge like to touch? Wet and nasty. So you pick that sponge up and it's like, oh, that's delicious. You can run water over that nasty sponge and it'll get some of it out, but it'll take a while to get it all out. What you really need to do is bite the bullet, you squeeze the sponge and all the bad stuff goes out, and you open it for the new water, and then you do that one more time maybe. And that's a much more efficient way to do that, right? Well, this is just our little cleaning corner. We'll come back to plants now. Oh, no, wait. Astringent is wringing out the bad fluid that's got all the garbage and the damage that's in the area. And plantain, like doing that sponge, it wrings out all the garbage and it moves that along. And so then all the nutrients and good things can come in, and all the things that are irritating the area are shipped out. And so there's not as much of that going on. So plantain being astringent really helps cool off wounds that are festering. And that's what was going on with my wife. Astringent also really helps with two things, practically miraculously. You can have that in one day, go from a tender, aching, terrible experience to half that or none of that. Because what makes pain in the gums is usually there's no space when it swells up, and then it's very tender. You put an astringent on it, it tightens it down. So, Plantago, that's what we've been talking about. So, here's for future you. I post these on YouTube, by the way. So, this is Plantago. Now, how do we identify this guy? We're all at it now. Now we know what it's used for. Plantago, you'll notice all the leaves are coming from the dirt, not the stem. They spiral out in a rose, like, you know how corsages or roses, they have petals going in every direction. Well, this is what we call a rosette. And since it's at ground level and not from the stem, we call it a basal ground level rosette. So that's the first thing you look for, basal rosette. Second thing you look for, on these leaves, you probably can see it even though they're behind a barrier here, there's veins that are very prominent. Those veins, here, if you want to feel it right there, the veins are so prominent that you can feel them, and they're like a little washboard on the back. The leaf stalk at the base of the leaf also has those veins in it. And so if you take the leaf stalk and break it, you'll usually hear a snick, snick, snick as the veins actually break last of all. And so looking for those veins that are really prominent is a good beginning way to go ahead and identify. And the leaf stalk has one last thing that's really helpful for identifying it. When you see veins that are this tough, what's the vegetable you think of? Celery. Yes. Well, the leaf stalk is shaped in a U shape. And you actually see those same holes that you see in celery, and that's where the fibers travel. And so the petiole, the leaf stalk, that's the fancy word for leaf stalk, by the way, petiole, is basically a little miniature celery. And if you pop it off and look at it, you'll recognize it as celery, basically. The last thing to identify, and the leaves can be fat or skinny, either way. Fat for major, skinny for lanceolata. And the last thing to identify it is this seed head. And I recommend that you only harvest it when the seed head is present, because when they're young, Yes, the celery stuff really helps you tell it apart, but just to be safe, the seed head, none of the lookalikes have a seed head like that. So once you see this little dibble wire sticking up, scientific term, then that really helps you tell this guy apart. So, this is a grade 1 plant, really safe. So it's a nice pot herb. You can do it, you can add it to your salad, your soups. FYI, it is bitter. So while it is food grade and very safe, younger leaves taste better. I personally just like them, but some people haven't acclimated as much to bitter as much as my poor palate has over time. So, any questions about Plantago?
Do you have a formula, a recipe for the salad that you've used?
Do I have a recipe or formula for the salve that I have used? I do. I tend to kind of change stuff when I make it again, unless it's like right on. I believe that one was equal parts. Actually, I think that one might have been the one that I made with my friend in med school together. So Plantago, chickweed, yarrow, and those were the 3 main ones. And I mixed those oils together, and then we did the beeswax and made the salve from there. And so that's kind of those are the plants that come to mind that were likely in there. There might have been, I feel like there's 1 or 2 more, but that would still be serviceable. So, good question. Any others?
What about when you said astringent, how do you make an astringent?
Astringent, just the Boy Scout method. You put it over the top, it would work really well, or you eat it. Remember Dr. Patrick Jones? He put it on the dog's forepaw, but he also had the dog eat it. Eating it sends it all through the body, which is really good. People who have connective tissue issues or who are low on potassium, eating it's really helpful because if you have, I actually have an autoimmune joint disease, can you tell? Doing this should be extremely painful. If you have inflammation in your ligaments, in your connective tissue, the stuff that moves, the muscles have ligaments attached to them, and if that stuff gets inflamed, because you have a connective tissue disease, then it's all swollen up and full of fire, if you want to think of it that way, and astringents suck it all down, and so now it's moving much more in the grooves that it should be. And so, really nice to have that one on hand. So, how do you use it as an astringent? On the top if it's one area, but if it's the whole body, you eat it. So.
What about for a toothache? If you wanted to store it for toothaches and stuff like that, would you just dry it to put it in, to use it? Or?
Great question. Question was, using it for toothaches, or in general, can you dry it, and how do you use it for toothaches? Drying Plantago is actually not the best way to use it. If it gets dried, its strength goes down quite a bit, more than some other plants who don't mind being dried. It's not gone though, it's still useful. But it's much better fresh, especially for the wound healing parts. The astringent parts would actually still be good when it's dried. So for a toothache and for astringent purposes, you can dry it, and you just put it in and hold it over the swollen gum. And so you just go around like you have a wad of gum stuck next to it. And then you do that for about 20 minutes, 15 minutes, and then you go ahead and swallow it. So, pretty straightforward on that one. Really nice field medicine, especially because Plantago is one of the few plants that grows not just on one continent, not just on 2, not just on 3, it grows on all of them. Antarctica perhaps included. I need to verify that. There are very few things that grow in very small portions, and I would be very surprised if anything grows there. This one probably does, but I haven't verified that. So every continent except for Antarctica. So this is one that's really nice to know when you're traveling. Excellent first aid. I've also had it successfully used for burns, for cuts, for bruises, for wasp stings. Me and 2 nephews, I shouldn't be happy about this, but me and 2 nephews were doing stuff out on the homestead, and one of the nephews went that way, and the other one went with me this way, This is slightly oversimplifying the story to make it get across quickly. And everybody got stung by wasps, so that was great. But the nephew that was with me, we got some Plantago and put it on there. And the nephew that wasn't with me, I decided to let it be an experiment. I didn't know. So using Plantago really helped speed that up and bring the pain levels down quite a bit more. So after that, you know, everyone come with Uncle Taylor. Yeah, that's definitely popular now. So wasp stings, very helpful, especially if you get it on quickly. If you wait a while, it's less effective. But yeah, nature's Band-Aid goes really well on a heck of a lot of stuff. So we'll go ahead and scoot from that one, and we'll move on to this next one. Anybody want to take a guess at what this one is? It's kind of hard when it's pressed, because this one's usually really curly. Undulating edges on its leaves, usually.
Comfrey?
Comfrey's not a bad guess. It's not comfrey, but I can see why you'd say that, given the leaf size. Dock. Yeah, this is curly dock, to be specific. Curly dock, or Rumex crispus. There is another dock called burdock, but this one is curly dock. All right, so curly dock is another one that the Native Americans had uses for. Actually, previous one, Native Americans very quickly picked up on how to use it after it was brought over, so they used it for a lot of things. This one, Native Americans would use everything above ground was something that they would use as a form of food. And then beneath the ground, the roots, that's where it was medicine. Bless you, you're about to receive much bounty. So curly dock. You've probably seen, as it was in the pictures, where the stalks turn rust red with these bunches of seeds on it. Right about now, actually. And the rust red, if you zoom in on it, it looks like this, with these little seeds that have, it's like an egg that has 3 wings around it. Kind of like a dolphin has 2 fins and then the fin up top, so 3 fins with the dolphin in the center. The seed is in the center of all these wings. So if you zoom in on those seed heads and you see this, look, this is an identifying feature. Look for the seed that is surrounded by 3 wings. So there's an egg that's got 3 little fins attached to it. So, see it okay? So these seeds, these seeds are indeed edible. They actually make a nice gluten-free flour. So if you go, the Native Americans would take these and they would grind them up and they made little seed cakes or ground coarse flour cakes. And they'd be used as a source of calories. Now, the leaves, also, when they're around, they've got this kind of acidic taste, a little bit of tartness. And actually, Roman soldiers, when they were going on march thousands of years back, they would pick these leaves, it's believed, it's kind of hard to be positive back then, and they would chew on them and suck on them to help get rid of thirst, because that sourness would close up down that thirst reflex. And Native Americans would use these as food or medicine, depending on the tribe. Everything above ground is kind of a 1.5. The seeds are a 1. The leaves are like a 1.5. There's one very minor thing to be aware of with the leaves. They have oxalic acid, which is found in spinach as well. So that tells you how dangerous it is. But if you have issues with kidney stones, your doctor's probably told you don't have too much spinach. Might make your kidney stones worse. Same thing here. So this is one to have about as much as you'd have for spinach. But besides that, pretty safe. So, but the roots beneath, those are number 2, straight up. Those are medicine, not food. So while everything above is good for food, the roots have a concentration of something called chrysofanic acid. And chrysofanic acid is actually where the name yellow dock comes from. If you take the root and you cut it, and you look into the center of the root, you'll see either pale root or a dot of yellow, or sometimes the entire root is yellow. What you are seeing, whether it's a little yellow or a lot of yellow, the yellow that you see, that's chrysofanic acid. Chrysofanic acid has a yellow color. And that is also a medicinal ingredient. And so this is really cool because it's one of the times that you can actually look at it and say, I know how strong the medicine is in this plant just by how it looks. So you're like, that's a good root. There you go. Chrysofanic acid is really good at helping skin health improve. And it helps the liver as well. And so the liver-skin connection, this is helpful for things like acne, or breakouts, or rashes. Your skin having things like eczema or psoriasis, it can help those. Will it necessarily cure it all on its own? Not necessarily, sometimes. But chrysofanic acid is a very nice compound, and you can see how good it is. And so the root, you would go ahead and usually, you can't do a tea with a root because it's too tough, right? So what we do is it's called a decoction. You grind the root down a little bit and then you boil it for 10 to 20 minutes. And then you pour it off. So it's a tea except higher temperature. And by doing that, you can get the benefits out of it. Now, what are the benefits? Well, we talked about liver, we talked about skin. It's also good for the kidney. It does one more thing, everybody's favorite party drug. Laxative. So it helps you go, all right? Moves things out so you aren't constipated. And this last one is why it's technically a grade 2. Laxatives that are stimulating laxatives, if you use them too long, more than 10 days, then your body can say, well, someone else is doing that job for me, I guess I'll stop. And then if you ever stop using your laxative, then nothing moves very well. So, short-term use. But curly dock or yellow dock. How do you identify it? Well, take a look at the leaves. I have 2 leaves here because number 1, the first leaf over here, I worked really hard to get it all flat and straight. And then I realized they are never flat or straight, so I pressed another one. They usually have some curl to the edges of their leaves, as you can see in this picture. It's hard to get with a press because you're flat and the curl goes away. So you can see that there's some frilliness to the edges there. The leaves also are kind of irregular. One leaf will be really frilly, the next one will have one side that's frilly, the other one that's straight, one of them will be huge, one of them will be medium. The leaves like to play around with how they look more than most plants do. So knowing what the leaf looks like helps. If you follow that leaf stalk down, you'll find it's another basal rosette. And only on the second year does the seed stalk come up. The first year it stays as a basal rosette all year long. But if you follow that leaf stalk down and you pull it right at the base, you're going to feel this sheath that's around the base of the leaf. And that sheath is clear or maybe green, light green, and it is extremely slick and slippery. It's like there's this little, I know this makes it sound delightful, but this little slime ring around it. You know, you go ahead and you grab it, you pull it up. That is called the ochrea. And if you found the ochrea, that's a really good indication that you have the right plant. There are other plants that have ochreas that are like sister plants to it, but none of them have the same seed on top of that. So once you recognize what the leaves are supposed to look like and have that down, start with the seeds, is what I recommend. When the seeds are present, and look at the leaf and the seeds together, and then once you're pretty confident you have the leaf right, then you can check that you're right with the leaf by looking at that ochrea and feeling it. Make sense? All right. So this one's really good for skin conditions. I'll tell you, I usually put multiple herbs together, and I did that again this time, but I had a patient come in, because I have an office, by the way. Didn't become a doctor just to present, although honestly that is probably never going away because it's lots of fun. But I had a patient come in, and she had a couple things that she wanted to work on, but one that wasn't her main issue, but one that was kind of a side issue was acne. It was pretty significant acne. And I made up a liver cleanse with this herb and a few other herbs, and I gave it to her and I said, do this for 1 week, and then come and report back. After 1 week, because the liver is where we do a lot of our detoxification, and because there's a little bit of laxative action, which is where the liver is supposed to dump everything, and because by taking this you're getting some fiber as well, if you do it the right way, that picks up all the garbage that the liver puts out at the curb, and then that goes out in the stool. If you don't have fiber, you just reabsorb everything, by the way. That is how we get rid of cholesterol, for example. People have high cholesterol. One reason why is because people don't have fiber to bind it up and pull it out of the body. It just gets reabsorbed. And after 1 week of this, her acne decreased by like 60%, where it used to be just like covered her whole back and the majority of the space that you could see. And it went down by 60% in 1 week after years and years and years of it being like that. So, fantastic for the liver, which means it's fantastic for the skin. It also helps the skin directly. Any questions on yellow dock, curly dock, Lumex Christmas?
Burdock work the same way.
Burdock is different. It's a sister plant. It also helps the liver, also helps the kidneys, also helps the skin. Does it a little differently. Also not laxative, so you can have that one long term. So that's the one that's done, that one's more grade 1. They actually eat burdock in Asian cultures as a vegetable. It's called go-go. So, very good herb. Similar but different.
So do you eat curly dock raw, or do you cook it?
The leaves, I would go ahead and have some of those raw when I'm going around. If you cook it, I haven't tried that, but I'm sure that's fine as well. The seeds, you want to grind those down. Sometimes they have a bitter undertone. Other times they don't. It just depends on the plants you get. And if you want it to be able to rise well when you're cooking with it, you need to blend it with a gluten-containing flour, because that's what helps with the binding. Also, it's crumbly if it's 100% just curly dock flour. If you want to get rid of the bitterness, along with some of the nutrition, but not all of it, you can put it in a pot of water and let it sit overnight, and then pour the water off and dry it out again. And it will pull all of the bitter compounds out. So then the flavor improves. Kind of like acorns, if you're familiar with how to do it with them. So, excellent questions. Any others? All right, our last one. This one I call Diabetic's Delight. So this one is one of my favorite flavors, honestly. I have a sister-in-law who's a really good cook, and she actually likes grilling and going to competitions. You know, southern cooking has a lot of grilling and smoking. And she keeps contacting me saying, yeah, it's right. Winged sumac. She's asking me, do you have any more of that spice? Do you have any of that yet? No, it's not in season yet. Oh, I gave you 2/3 of my supply last year. So I have never used it with patients because I keep eating it because it's delicious. Winged sumac. So sumac is something that grows like a weed around here. It's rampant. The leaves usually start out green and then they fade to red as they dry, and they have spots along the way. And so, sumac is actually, the berries are used in Mediterranean cooking very often. So all around the Mediterranean Sea, over near Greece and that area, they have a spice mix called za'atar. And if you really like Mediterranean food, maybe you're familiar with it, but if you've ever eaten Mediterranean food, I can almost guarantee that you've tasted it It's got a little bit of a lemony zing, and then a bunch of complementary background flavors that are hard for me. It's a little aromatic as well, and it's just beautiful. Shawarma, it's got some of that on it. Za'atar is made up of usually 5-ish. Every different Mediterranean mother has a different secret recipe. So 5-ish herbs, but the star herb, the one that gives it that zing, that's a little bit lemony and fruity, and just the right amount of sour with just a note of sweet that just kind of fills in the flavor profile. That's sumac. And that is in za'atar, and it's in almost every recipe that's over there. It's like the flavor of the area. And we have some growing here. It also has lots of really fantastic health properties. It is strongly anti-inflammatory. It is also maybe a little less strong than like turmeric or curcumin, which is really strong, but in a different way, so this would be complementary. But it is strong. It also helps regulate blood sugar. Makes you more insulin sensitive instead of insulin resistant. So lots of people have issues with their blood sugar and insulin being effective there. And so this one helps out. And I call it Diabetic's Delight because it tastes good while doing it. So the part that we're talking about is the berries. Now berries, like cherries, have a hard center, a pit. So don't just crunch on them. You're going to lose a tooth. You need to go ahead and there's a processing method. You can go ahead and take a picture. I think I have it on here how to do it. But basically you put it in a blender and you blend it all off. And the seeds, they're technically edible. So if any of them shatter down into dust, then that's fine in the blender. But if they don't shatter and they just are knocked out and all the flesh is knocked off of them, then you can just strain so all the flesh goes through the strainer and all the seeds stay on top, and then you're good. So you just separate it. But you need to make sure it's dry, because it will mold like anything else if it's wet. So there's the rundown. That is extremely strong tasting, and it's like lemon. I use it anywhere I would use lemon pepper, and it has those compounds that make so that it's anti-inflammatory, insulin sensitizing, and it is also slightly antimicrobial. It's not really strong on the antimicrobial, but it's one that's kind of present. It's also kind of preservative. And so if you put some with other foods, they tend to last longer. If they're like leftovers, I'm looking at experimenting with it to see if you can also do an extraction of it to make herbal remedies last longer. There are some other herbs that I know do that very well. Lorea tridentata is amazing as a preservative. I wonder if this one works too, because Lorea grows in Arizona, doesn't grow here. So that was my go-to. So this one's really fun. Now, how do we identify it though? And Rus capelinum, by the way, is the Latin name. Rus meaning red. You'll notice this is called winged sumac, because right along the leaf stem here, there are special little leaves that you don't usually see. And those are what are called the wings. They're not these leaves, but they're coming off the central stem. So for winged sumac, you look for that. And then you look for leaves that are coming off opposite of each other, and then a terminal leaf. So they're coming off opposite, but they've also got these winged ones down the center, and then the terminal leaf. Okay?
Right now, is it red right now?
There are, do you mean the leaf or the berry?
The leaf.
The leaf right now has dots of red, but is mostly green. And then the berries, I'm not convinced on whether the berries are still growing or if we just had tiny berry spikes this year. Because usually they were like this big last year, and that's how big you usually get them. And this year they're like, you know, dinky, that big, that wide, and it's like, that's not going to make enough spice for my dinner, you know. So there's the wings. And then it goes.
Tell the difference between that sumac and poison sumac.
Thank you very much. Here's your $20 for asking that question for me. There are the wings. So, the way that you tell this apart from poison sumac, which is a real plant and it is, spoiler, poisonous, is the color of the berries. Poison sumac has white berries, very different. Winged sumac and staghorn sumac and one other sumac that I forget the common name for, but another roost, they have red berries. None of the other ones have white berries. Don't eat white berries. That is a general rule. There are only like 3 edible white berries in the world. The rest of them are poison. So, in general, white is just not a friendly color when it comes to berries. But yeah, if you have red berries and you have these wings along the leaf stem, and then the leaves are coming off across from each other. See how it's one set, one set, one set, and there's a terminal leaf. And I'm going to come around with a picture of what it looks like out in the wild. It grows about yay tall, and berry clusters come off up here. You can see they look like just big old kind of pyramid sort of outline of the berry cluster. And so it just looks like a spike of berries coming off.
Poison sumac, the leaf pattern is not the same.
Poison sumac has a number of things that are different. The leaf pattern is different. Poison sumac also does not grow along roadsides like this does. This likes disturbed areas like roadsides. Poison sumac likes bogs, so you have to like get your wellies on and go out in the middle, deep into the bog and go find poison sumac, and you're like, oh, that looks like a nice snack. So you have to try really hard to make that mistake, usually. So.
In Texas, we were told if it was red, don't touch it.
Yeah, I know. I've heard so many people say that they've been trained to stay away from all sumacs, and it's one of those times where someone got confused and spread it wide. So I've eaten this, I've fed it to other people, and yeah, there's plenty of resources that say it's edible, and it has been for thousands of years. So, but it's better safe than sorry. That's always the case. So go and back up your sources outside of here. But there are some other cool things about all of these, but we're going to leave it there so that I don't hold you guys longer than I said. Any questions before I do my last little spiel about events and such?
Could you make a tea out of that sumac? Would it make a tea for blood sugar is what I'm thinking.
Wonderful. So, yes, the question was, would it make a good tea? I'm glad you said that. Sumac lemonade is actually the most common thing people do with this plant. If it has not rained in the last 3 to 5 days, so the berries, I guess I should go into this, I'm glad you asked that. The berries, they've got little teeny tiny hairs, and those hairs have nice tasting acid. Like, you know, there's acid in orange juice too. And they've got some citric acid, they've got some acetic acid, they've got some, I forget what all the other acids are that are in there. Formic, I think, might be in there. But anyway, they're all edible, and so if you touch the berry, you only do this after you know what it is. If you touch the berry and then taste your finger, and it hasn't rained for several days, you're gonna get a nice sour kick. Sometimes it'll be a gentle one, especially if it has rained, but that's the way that you can say, oh yeah, that's gonna be a good one. Then you take that bunch, you look through it, and pretend that you've looked at everything, and then you just tell yourself, don't think about it. And then you put it into your water bottle, and you shake it around, and then after 5 minutes, you pull it back out, and then you have sumac lemonade. And you can go ahead and drink it. Really satisfying. Very nice. Even more satisfying is if you do the blender thing, and then you take some of the seeds that have powder all over them, but the seeds are too big to be going through. And you take the seeds, put them in little pouches, and use those to make lemonade, and all the powder is your seasoning. And then you get it really strong, because it's opened up all of the berries, and you get everything coming out much easier. So, excellent question. Yes, you can make it as tea, and yes, it would be anti-inflammatory, and I'm pretty dang sure that that also has the blood sugar effects. I think this is a water-soluble medicinal compound, so water extractions work. So, good question. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and close up on these for today. Thank you guys for coming out. We have a couple events that are kind of cool that you might be interested in. So, number one, this is a monthly event. I have new plants every month, and it's on the second Tuesday at 5:30 every month, and you're welcome to come and learn and join us. Other events, I have opened a second cohort of my herbalism class that is once a month and running for 8 months, and you learn everything you need to be a home herbalist. And so if you're interested in that, talk to me after. And then I guess the last thing is there's a plant walk that is available that I am doing in Kansas, Oklahoma, which is about 25 minutes from here, something like that. And you can find out information about that by going to my website and clicking on the Learn About Our Events here. That one is a paid plant walk, but we're going to go over plants in the wild so you can actually see what we're talking about. I used to try to bring in harvested plants, and my wife didn't like how our car looked. So, matter of fact, Curly Dock was the last plant. Seeds were everywhere. So it was like, we're done. All right, got it. She was really nice. She didn't actually put her foot down, but I kind of am a clean freak, and she mentioned it once and only once, and I'm like, all right, that's enough for me. So, but those are the cool events we've got coming up. If you're interested, let me know after, but we'll go ahead and let you go. Thank you guys for coming tonight.
Do you have a YouTube? You said you had a YouTube channel?
I do have a YouTube channel, and this will be uploaded to it, or I give this talk